After blowing a 3-1 series lead against the Denver Nuggets in the bubble, the Utah Jazz had some demons to exercise heading into Game 4 against the Memphis Grizzlies, also with a 3-1 lead. To make sure they didn't blow it this time, the Jazz put up a whopping 47 points in the first quarter, setting a franchise record while also opening up a 20-point lead to begin the game. If you're still wondering whether the Utah Jazz should be feared in the playoffs, you're going to continue wondering because there's just not much more they can do to prove the level they're at after this performance. After the game started normally with a 7-5 Utah lead, the Jazz ran a handoff to get Bojan Bogdanovic matched up against Ja Morant with momentum going his way. After Bogey takes Ja off the dribble, he uses a spin move to draw Jonas Valanciunas, which forces Dillon Brooks to account for Gobert at the rim. At this point, the defense is collapsed, and Kyle Anderson is left to guard two Jazz players. When the pass is made, Anderson rotates and Donovan Mitchell hits Mike Conley for a wide-open three. On the defensive end, the Jazz finally figured out their pick-and-roll defense, and as Dillon Brooks gets the step on Royce O'Neal, Gobert has to step up, which should mean that Valanciunas has an easy dunk or layup. But with the improved execution of their pick-and-roll defense, Royce O'Neal doesn't stop and watch, but instead he performs a late switch to steal the dump-off pass from Valanciunas. Memphis dared Mitchell to make the pick-and-roll pull-up three that takes his game to another level, and Mitchell drained it. And while Bogdanovic doesn't have the tightest ball handling skills in pick-and-roll, here he pitches the ball to Gobert and receives the handoff to get Kyle Anderson behind him and create a 2-on-1 situation with Valanciunas. And let's watch that again and understand that while Bogdanovic pitches the ball rather than dribbling it, it allows him to run much faster around the screen, which is something that Duncan Robinson, another weak dribbler, used to get around a weakness last year to put the defense at odds. Once the 2-on-1 situation is created, Bogdanovic fakes the pass to Gobert, and even though Valanciunas doesn't bite on the pass fake, Bogey's still able to finish around him for the layup. Here, the Jazz run a double staggered screen for Mitchell, and Brooks goes over both screens. And what's key here is the rhythm to Donovan Mitchell's drive. He pauses right here to read whether the corner defender is collapsing onto Gobert or not. If the defender collapses into the lane, he can pivot and fire a skip pass to Bogey. But if Anderson doesn't collapse into the lane, Mitchell knows that Valanciunas will be hesitant to leave Gobert. After reading the defense, Mitchell bursts forward and is able to finish around Valanciunas for the layup. One of the keys to this dominating first quarter performance was Utah's transition offense, and here it looks like Jaren Jackson Jr. is out of position, but he's really plugging up the lane in case Mitchell runs a pick and roll with Gobert and rejects the screen to drive baseline. But Royce O'Neal shows him that you can't leave him open even in transition, and he sinks the early three. And so now that the Grizzlies are more respectful of the Jazz shooters, the lane is open and Mitchell is able to drive in transition to get the easy layup. It's just so difficult to defend a team that has an agile but powerful driver surrounded by elite shooters and a rim threat. It's been clear throughout the series that Donovan Mitchell likes to get matched up with Grayson Allen, and here the Jazz have Mitchell run a pick and pop with Bogey to force the switch and get Allen on Mitchell. Then, Mitchell runs pick and roll with Derek Favors and easily puts Grayson Allen in jail. And even though Dillon Brooks completely abandons a lethal shooter in Bogdanovic to try to plug up the lane, Mitchell's tight dribble allows him to navigate through traffic while not rushing, and Favors sealing Valanciunas allows Mitchell an easy layup. And while we all know the Jazz have great shooters across the board, the Grizzlies seem equally concerned with them as drivers. So when Bogey gets the switch on Ja Morant, Dillon Brooks tries to plug up the lane, leaving O'Neal open. Instead of shooting a contested shot, O'Neal pump fakes and drives into the lane, forcing Morant away from bogey, and it's a wide open three again. And while this video hasn't focused much on the defense, we did cover a play earlier highlighting the Jazz using a late switch strategy against the pick and roll, and here we see it again but on a drive. John Morant drives baseline, forcing Favors to meet him, which in theory should open up Valanciunas for an easy dunk or layup. But once Favors leaves Valanciunas, Clarkson recognizes this and immediately rotates to the big man for the steal. This leads to a transition three. There were also a couple of instances of the Jazz defenders having great hands on drives to force a jump ball and a steal. When Memphis thought it couldn't get any worse, the Jazz's own version of their death lineup came into the game, and they run another handoff to get Allen switched onto Conley. Conley then runs pick and roll with Gobert and somehow dribbles around both Allen and Jaren Jackson Jr. for a wild but in control running hook thing. Then the Jazz run a corner pick and roll between Conley and Gobert, and the Grizzlies force it to the baseline, so Conley drives baseline, forcing help from the corner. With Morant splitting the difference between Niang and Clarkson, he's used to seeing the Jazz make a touch pass to the corner after hitting the man on the wing. So instead of rotating to Niang to contest the shot, he plays the passing lane, and Niang is wide open for a three even though he's an excellent shooter. And to cap things off, the Jazz run an inbounds play with a bunch of screening actions, first having Niang cut to the corner, forcing a switch. Once the switch occurs, it's honestly hard to tell who Morant is supposed to be guarding here, but when Dillon Brooks signals for him to contest the Clarkson shot, Conley ends up wide open for a long two to beat the buzzer. And all of this crazy stuff happened in the first quarter. So underestimate the Jazz at your own peril, and remember to subscribe to this channel for more videos.